Hello? Can you hear me? If you can, then beware, for this is Ask a Pathfinder's Horror Month, and within this video you will find horrific details, adult themes, and graphic descriptions. If you have a heart condition or perhaps you are a young viewer, then turn away now. There's nothing here for you. Viewer discretion is advised. Alright. Hey guys. Yeah, welcome to Ask a Pathfinder. Okay, so for this video here, we are going to be talking about horror. What is it? What makes it so good? We're going to define horror as a genre, and we're going to take a look at some of the subgenres within horror that you can bring to your very own RPGs. Now, if you're one of those people who do not like horror, stick around, because look, at the end of the day, I'm not going to try and convince you to like horror. I'm not going to get people to confront themselves like that. That's just not what I'm about. But I'm going to give you some information about horror which you may not be aware of. Now, a lot of people like myself who like horror are super loyalists. We're like, yes, no matter what people say, horror is awesome. Yeah, no. This is not what this video is about. So, have a listen. If you hear something new, let me know in the comments below. If you have your own reasons for it, I'd love to hear that too, because part of that makes me a great GM as well. Being able to know exactly what it is, my fans, my players, my friends, all of them, what they think about, and, how they want things to kind of work for their own games. So, what is horror? Now, someone once came up to me and said, I do not like horror because horror is just about having the antagonist win. What is the point of playing an RPG if all you get to do as a PC is sit there and walk towards your death? It is stupid and I don't want to play horror. Alright, fair enough. Look, there is some truth to that in the fact that, yes, some horrors encourage the victory of the antagonist. But that is not the definition of horror. Horror is a mood. Horror is an atmosphere. It's a feeling that you have throughout the game. It is a sense of fear and of dread. It is one where you feel like the consequences of whatever will happen are severe. At least severe enough for you to be concerned about it. That is all horror is. Horror is that dread, that chill, that feeling, that emotion. And the one thing that I can only say as a valid reason for why it may not be appropriate is horror creates a very strong emotional and empathic response in your players. Not just their characters, but the players themselves. And some people just don't get on with that. It makes them feel uncomfortable, it makes them feel uneasy, and that's not what an RPG is. An RPG is all about having fun, enjoying yourself with a group of friends, and socializing. Now, if you're a GM, if you're a GM and you love horror like I do, then you've got to kind of play the balancing game. You can either be excellent at horror and be really into it and really in-depth and detailed and stuff, and at the same time, if you don't take into account the comfort and pleasure of your players, then that's kind of you falling down as a GM. So you need to balance the two. You need to make them uncomfortable enough that they're having fun, the same way like you're on a roller coaster and you're screaming your head off but you're laughing, and at the same time, remember, you are playing a game. Alright, so that is horror. That is at least horror to me, horror in the context of RPGs. Now, let's talk about some of the subgenres, because there are so many subgenres, and I think, honestly, when you look at your own horror adventure, you need to pick one. You need to pick something that is really going to stand out and your players are going to latch onto. So, the first one I'd like to talk about is probably the easiest horror to get into, and that is dark fantasy, okay? Now, dark fantasy is basically it's a sister to fantasy. It is taking what we already know as basic fantasy tropes and expanding them into a more, I suppose, dark realism. Something that is more consequence-driven. I'll give you an example. You're a group of heroes and you are journeying through the forest when you come upon a troll who seems to be guarding a bridge. The troll sees you and snarls, drawing forth its giant great club. Boom, 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 lumbers towards you. Roll initiative. Very familiar scene. Easy. Now all we need to do is change the tone a bit. as you approach the long and rickety bridge that lies before you, you can see this hulking mass covered in warts and hair, its green leathery skin oozing almost this glistening transparent liquid. You hear the sounds of bones snapping and sinew stretching as you look and see this creature with immense tusks stripping flesh from what appears to be a man's leg. He stops, smelling at the air. He looks at you, his eyes glistening like silver mirrors as it reflects the moonlight. And so on and so forth. Now, that is the difference between regular fantasy and dark fantasy. It's still a troll on a bridge. It is still going to be an encounter. It's still going to be all that. But we've added in that extra tone. We've added in those extra moments of atmosphere and depth. And that is the only difference between dark fantasy and regular fantasy. Dark fantasy also does tend to have its own tropes. Like, it usually tends to be something along the lines of tyranny, torture, evil, yada, 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 yada. All that kind of stuff. It's about there aren't heroes in this world. There aren't people who go out there and save everyone, and the people are disillusioned by it because they don't exist. And that's kind of the attitude of a dark fantasy adventure. Okay, moving from dark fantasy forward a little bit to gothic adventures. Now, gothic adventures I kind of put in the category of classic because you will find that things like vampires, werewolves, mummies, zombies, Jekyll and Hyde, all that kind of stuff, fit into gothic horror. It basically represents a period of time just after the industrialization of man, where there were still things that were unknown, things that existed before we became civil, before we became technologically advanced, before we thought that the four walls in our house made us safe, that there were things that still bumped in the night, and they still hounded and remembered the old ways and came back. Take the story of course, Dracula, where a noble woman sleep in her bedchambers, no one's the wiser, and suddenly, bam! They've been bitten by a creature, and the urban legends and the old tales tell of a count who lives on a hill, blah, 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 blah. Right? Frankenstein's monster, exact same thing. Mad scientist who believes technology solves everything. I will defy God by channeling lightning into this body that I will go into the graves and dig up and stitch together. You know, again, all of this stuff is about that sense that being civil or being, sort of technologically advanced means nothing against the lore, the secrets, the mysteries that exist within the supernatural realms. So Gothic kind of fits into that kind of criteria. If you're looking for some really cool Gothic inspiration, check out what's called the Hammer Horrors. Now, they're very classic films, so be warned. You know, yes, you have to watch films that you would otherwise watch in film school, but they are really well done. They show a very Gothic world in a Gothic setting. I mean, hell, Batman's Gothic to a degree. But how is Batman Gothic? Well, think about it. You've got this guy, billionaire, builds a batsuit, yada, 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 but he's fighting insane, lunatics that are running around, his city. But the thing is lunatics were around long before, before Batman, before anything and stuff like that. And so despite having all this wealth and all these resources and all these things at his disposal, there's still something out there, some boogeyman that kind of exists, So Gothic kind of fits into that category. All right, next we move on to the slasher hunted subtype. Now, the slasher hunter subtype I've kind of merged, right? Because here's my kind of thought on it. Slashers are kind of like Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger. Some lunatic is chasing after you with something sharp and he wants to murder you. That's cool. That's fair enough. But the story elements of what makes a slasher film also are shared with stories that are just basically you being hunted by something. Take Aliens, for example, where there is literally this xenomorphic alien that is coming after you and chasing you through the air ducts, yada, yada, yada. Jaws, giant shark eating people, hunting them down. All of these things share those similarities. So what this is, at least what it kind of focuses on, is that fear of being hunted. The fear of a superior power or superior force coming down like a ton of bricks on you for no reason apart from the fact that you're prey. You are food. You are something that it is just going to take, like plucking an apple from a tree, and that's terrifying. Now, you want to be very careful when you run these kinds of games because players, they feel like they're invincible, and they have every right to be. When a player is presented with something they don't understand, players hit it. Players just thwap. There we go. Yep. Oh shit! I didn't do any damage. Oh crap. Okay. And that's when they kind of turn and run. What you need to do here is you need to build up. You need to create that anticipation, that anxiety before you get to that point. Because when it gets to the point where, yes, you see this thing, you need to make sure that their response is going to be really torn between flight and fight, right? Because, you don't want them to just turn around and murder your main bad guy. Set up a lot of things, like set up rumors, even stuff that's a lie, right? Like, there was this one guy who once upon a time was an executioner. Yes, that's right. And he slew hundreds and thousands of people every day. Thwack, thwack, thwack. And eventually he got old. And they told him he couldn't do it anymore. But he didn't stop. No. He just kept going. He found people, neighbors, anything that he would deem as a slight against civilization. He would just chop their heads off. It took years before they found him, and when they found him, he had hacked his own neck halfway through. But that's not the scariest thing. He lived. Yeah, Cleric got there in time and managed to stitch him up, but it left a jagged scar over his throat. And now everyone just calls him Scarneck. Anyway, I don't know. And he chops down people. Again, if you build that up and you say, okay, cool, that's really scary, and then you see this guy with a scar over his neck, he's got a huge axe, and he starts charging towards you, some players will turn around and go, yeah, I'm going to attack that, and other players will go, nah, the hell with that. So, that's kind of how you want to go with that. Alright. Staying on that note of, obviously, creating anticipation, stuff like that, and what have you, we are going to talk about cosmic or unknown horror. Now, I kind of, categorize these together because cosmic horror refers to the horror of not understanding or being able to perceive the intention, the motive, or the purpose of a entity, right? Commonly an entity from beyond the reaches of outer space where one cannot comprehend what is out there. There are still so many things we just do not understand about space and time and all that kind of stuff. And it's terrifying. The thought of a sentient life that may view us as insects is a horror. If you've ever gotten into anime or mangas, there's a manga called Gantz. And one of the things that kind of really weirded me out about it was that every kind of Gantz game, as it were, because it was basically about these kids, they died. And their souls were basically rebuilt, I guess, as bodies. And they would go out and they would hunt aliens. But these aliens were always very bizarre and weird and intriguing creatures. Like there was this one which was like Green Onion Boy. Yeah, go kill Green Onion Boy. And it was just this kid who was just eating green onions. And they killed him. And then there was Green Onion Alien Man. And there was this huge, massive one. And, it could rip people in half, tear their limbs apart, and stuff like that. And it was just, as it progressed, these things became more bizarre and more alien. So if you do get a chance to, go check it out because it explains exactly what it is to be a cosmic kind of horror. The reason I calculate this with unknown horror as well is because if you go into things like the deepest depths of the earth or even underwater, it becomes equally as aliens. Things we cannot understand or can't even begin to perceive. Those are still parts of other territories apart from space. H.P. Lovecraft specialized in a whole bunch of really interesting horror novels that explained that, but it was always the source being outer space or something like that. I'm just saying that, while those are cool and while those are great, it still preys on that fear of the unknown and that unsettling and chilling factor that, hey, something is looking at me the same way I look at a bug, What is it going to do to me? Is it just going to... it could equally pick me up and pin me to a board or squash me or... who knows what. So, yeah. Horror of the unknown is another. Alright, moving then on to the occult. Now, occult is basically something that has a lot of religious context. This can be things like possession, it can be things like ritualistic summonings of demons and entities from beyond the realms, etc., etc., etc. The idea behind these ones are very investigatory. You uncover a ritual, you discover a cult that's hidden away, you learn that there is a beast or a creature that is lurking in the community. Stuff like that is very good for intrigue and really awesome for a good investigation game. If you got a lot of players that like puzzles and like solving stuff, occult horror is definitely up your alley. Probably the best example I could give of an occult horror, I guess, would probably be what was it called? Well, Annabelle was a good one, but there was another one. There was it's on the tip of my tongue. Bollocks! I can't remember it. No, it's gone. It's one of those video ones, you know, where you kind of like sit there and you watch this house as these people are walking through it and carrying on their day-to-day life, but then strange and supernatural things happen. You know what? I bet everyone is shouting at the screen, I know what this is, because I'm an idiot. But anyway, yeah, it's like basically, you know, the recording of these little things like doors slamming and people getting drug off beds and things like that. So, whatever it is, leave a comment and tell me what it is, because my brain is just not working. But yeah, that's another example of the occult horror. Interestingly enough, though, the first film didn't really seem that way, but then as the film progressed and as they got into the sequels, it really did started taking on the occult horror vibe to it. All right, next up we have ghosts and urban legends, okay? Now, again, understand that every kind of horror has a legend about it. It has a story, and that's uncovering that story is part of horror. Ghosts and urban legends fit into a separate category where it is about learning that story, which is the scary bit, right? It is not about the creature or the entity or the beast that is terrifying. It is learning about this tragic or this horrifying or this soul-breaking event that has spawned this creature. That's the joy of that one. Let me give you an example. There is a tale, I think it's a Korean tale, where there's a woman who will appear in the middle of the night in a train station or a dark alley, and she wears a surgical mask. And she's quite a beautiful woman, and she will approach a man and say, "Do you think I'm pretty?" Now, if the man says, "Well, yeah, I think you're pretty," she'll take off the mask, and she'll reveal that her face is hideously scarred, her jaw barely attached with her tongue hanging out. And then she'll say, you know, "Do you think I'm pretty still?" And at that point, if they say yes, she'll then say, "Yeah, well, let me make you look like me," and pick up a pair of scissors and slice their face open. If they say no, then, you know, I think it kills you. I think in most answers it just kills you. But that's kind of the urban legend, kind of ghosty kind of thought, is that whole what made her that way. And it turns out, yes, she had a long relationship, and her boyfriend was very abusive, and eventually they got into a fight, and she ended up having her lip cut, and the husband went mad, and the husband cut the other side of her lip and then cut his own face, but then killed himself from blood loss. And so she went mad, and then she killed, you know, again, you can see how following this story is interesting. It is intriguing, and that's kind of the whole point of it, is to follow that and carry it on. Now, the interesting about the urban legend side of things is it sometimes doesn't have to be true. Sometimes the stories are so scary that the truth can be quite mundane. It could be that a man has started the whole urban legend thing and created a ghost, very Scooby-Doo style, but you can take it kind of dark, where, you know, yeah, there's this huge urban legend and people are dying and yada, yada, yada. Turns out it was Old Man Jenkins trying to scare people away so he can gain profits for, you know, buying this land. That stuff works too, and that is still a horror game. Alright. Okay, Jesus, I've got to be here for 20 minutes. Let's keep going. Fast as we can. Alright, psychological horrors. Now, psychological horrors are horrors where it is whittling and shaving down your character's sanity, right? They start losing their trust in what they perceive and understand in the world around them, okay? Psychological horrors can affect your PCs, but it's actually really good if you can get them to affect NPCs, because what happens at that point is you can see the effect of insanity slowly building in a character. Allow me to give you an example. The Joker is a fantastic example of psychological horror. Every time the characters of the Batman universe interact with the Joker, he takes a part of the heroes with them. He makes sure that even if his evil plot is stopped, some part of the characters is forever changed for it. The best example is in Injustice: Gods Among Us, a fantastic alternate universe story about how the Joker basically kidnapped Lois Lane. And, you followed Batman through, and he was investigating the Joker's movements and stuff like that. Joker had apparently killed Scarecrow and done a whole bunch of other different stuff. Anyway, the prelude to this, because there is a whole other story with it, which I'm not going to spoil, but, the prelude to the whole series is that the Joker had basically kidnapped Lois Lane and had implanted a bomb in her chest. And Superman had found that Lois Lane had been kidnapped and found Joker in a submarine, tore the submarine open, and tried to free her. And Joker had actually killed Scarecrow in order to steal fear toxin, and he had gassed Superman, who visually saw Doomsday, one of his biggest enemies, appear out of nowhere. And so Superman takes him into space and starts battling him as hard as he can. And when he gets into space, all he can hear is like the muffled cries of Batman, who's telling him, "It's not real, it's not real, it's all in your head." And by the time he realizes it, he realizes that he's killed Lois Lane and his unborn child. Now, this is an alternate universe thing, and it is the actual prelude start to Injustice: Gods Among Us, the series, as well as the games and stuff like that. It's a great series. It's fantastic. And like I said, that's how it starts. The whole thing is fantastic. But you can see there is an immediate change, and there's a whole thing where Superman, breaks down and he snaps, because obviously when Lois Lane dies, it's not only Lois that goes, but the bomb that Joker put into her chest, Metropolis gone, everything's gone. Superman's just beside himself, and that's kind of it. That's what you get with the psychological horror. I mean, obviously it doesn't have to be that grandiose where you're nuking a whole city, but it's about peeling away at your players or your NPCs' sanity to eventually get to that point where they do this, start losing themselves to their madness. Okay. One of the last ones I want to talk about is probably the toughest one to talk about, and I am going to give a warning here, guys. This is not for the weak-stomached. What I'm actually going to do is I am going to put a little thing over the lens cap to let you guys know that this is going to get pretty dark. If you want to, you can skip ahead and return to the same point where you'll see the little lid thingy, and you can continue from there. So, body horror is a horror of the grotesque. Saw, The Fly, a whole bunch of the Cronenberg movies and stuff like that. This is all about the corruption, the defilement, and the basically abuse of the body as part of the genre. It is about being grotesque. It is about being overly descriptive. It is about being horrendous and heinous. And it is literally, to the horror fan, it is like sea urchin. It's such an acquired taste. Even I do not enjoy that much body horror. It's just not my thing. It's just a bit too far. I like it if it's clever, but sometimes it's really not. So I'm going to share a story with you. It will make me physically uncomfortable, but I suppose it will demonstrate exactly what I'm going to say. So here comes the lid. All right, I'm going to count that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So here's the story. There is a movie called Eat, where this supermodel who is obsessed with, sort of trying to be prettier, yada, 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 develops a psychosis in which she starts to eat herself, physically eat herself. And there is this one scene which always sticks with me because it always gets a physical response from me. She's driving around in a car and she notices that one of her cuticles, so for those of you who don't know what a cuticle is, it's like that little bit of skin that's like just above the nail. One of her cuticles has started to, sort of peel and flake off. So she puts it in her mouth and starts feeling at it to try and get a hold of it. And with a really big tug, she stretches and pulls out her nerve ending from the tip of her fingernail all the way down through her forearm and into that little bit halfway through, and you can just see it dangling there like a little piece of bloody rope, and she's not screaming, she's not panicking, right? She's just freaking out that she's done this. But the weirdest thing of all is that she's like, she wants to eat it, and that thought that she's actually gonna be, like, basically like ripping it off is just, everything hurts. Okay, like, guys, I just want to explain to you literally what is happening to my body right now. My jaw is tense, my hands are like shaking, I've actually got a pain that is running that exact length that I was just describing to you. I feel my heart is racing, I feel nervous, like it's all of that stuff happens, and that is what body horror is. Okay, so let me go back to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, welcome back, guys. Okay, if you missed that story, basically the walkaway is that by being very vivid and very descriptive in your stories, you can create an empathic response from your players. By doing this, you can really make them feel physically uncomfortable. Now, while this can be a good thing, it may not necessarily be the thing for your particular game. Be sure that your players are okay with it, be sure that they understand what's happening, and yeah, be careful with it, because as I was telling the people who actually watched that little leg, I felt physically in pain, in anxiety, and all sorts of different things. That is what body horror does, and yeah, it makes for a very difficult type of thing you want to put in your RPG. Okay, last but not least, I want to talk about horror in other genres. Okay, now horror is a very interesting type of genre because you can basically tack it onto anything and create a horror game for it. Science fiction horror, boom, sci-fi horror. Steampunk horror, steampunk horror. Even old western horror, boom, western horror. If you don't believe me, let's try this. Western horror. Okay, so let's say that you are a cowboy. You are you are actually the son of a sheriff, and you get told that some people have been chased out of cattle country by these strange visions. They think that some bandits from a nearby town are chasing them away with bells and whistles and things like that. So you go to investigate, and as you do, you realize that the city that you went to go visit is now shrouded in this really strong sandstorm, so you need to take cover. But it's an abandoned place, right? So you decide, yeah, okay, cool, I need to find shelter. Anywhere is going to do. You go into a house, but as you do, you realize that there are people in the house who look at you confused. They don't know why you're there, but they know that the sandstorm makes it unsafe for you to go travel. So of course they welcome you, and they feed you, and they talk to you about all the things that you've seen on your travels. As the sandstorm starts to die down, you go to the window and you have a look out, only to realize that the town isn't there. Just rubble, bits of wood sticking out of the dirt like thorns. You look down and you see the bowl that you've been eating your stew from all night is filled with maggoty bread. And you turn to face the family, and you see the family standing there with blood dripping down their faces, with a hole through their forehead. Again, Western horror. You've got your lone wanderer, you've got your campfire stories, you've got the whole shebang, and then there's the horror, right? It's not just about tacking it onto it, it's about doing it within the genre that you're participating in. So remember, this is really good for your one-shots as well. So if you are playing in a, say, Starfinder game, yes, you can do sci-fi horror, but, yeah, just throw it in there for a once-off, like, here you go, try that, enjoy that, and have fun. So yeah, these ones are your sub-genres. So dark fantasy, gothic, slasher hunted, cosmic unknown, occult horror, ghost urban legend, psychological horror, body or grotesque horror, and of course, horrors of other genres. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was rather abrupt, and I did have a lot more I wanted to talk about, but it's gone for half an hour. This is probably one of the longest videos I've done / will ever do. Leave a comment below if you enjoyed this video, and like I said, look, if you are one of those people who do not enjoy horror, try a few. Like, they're all different levels. Like, I don't start with body horror, don't start with psychological horror, because they are probably really hardcore. Maybe start with something like dark fantasy or gothic. They're very easy things to get into and run almost parallel to the fantasy adventures you already know and love. Likewise, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to share it around and let people know about Ask a Pathfinder, because hopefully, as of 2-3 weeks from now, I will be moving into my own new studio, and I will be able to film even better quality than this, and I want to bring you guys along for the ride. So, till next time, guys, keep your dice rolling and make sure your ideas stay mindworm free.